It is not even trying to be nice outside, guys. So we're gonna work on something inside. So the goal today is to work on this. This space is a place where we obviously intend to have a work area. And this is kind of just how it ended up. After a little bit of time, we needed it to be functional, and one thing after another, and here we are. We've got a sink, we've got our laundry, and that's a table, I think, with some paper towels and a bunch of dishes. I asked on Facebook and Instagram if there's a good number of you out there, not everybody, who would be more interested in kind of following along a little bit on the design process. When I say the design process, a couple people misunderstood. They think that we got to this point and we're like, gosh, what should we do with the inside of the house? Obviously, that's not true. We started with a floor plan and we've been kind of working towards that floor plan. But there are some subtleties to this design that we are kind of learning from living here that we feel like we can improve. So this area is actually going to, in the long term, be a laundry and a food prep area. We plan on doing a lot of our canning and those types of projects in this area. Right now it's serving as our canning area, our kitchen, and our laundry. I'd like to start working on the cabinet design for this area. It's kind of a life upgrade. And I know there's somebody out there who's watching this video who's thinking to themselves, why don't you put siding on your house? I'm gonna say it one more time, a little slower for those folks who maybe aren't so quick to catch on. We can't put siding on the house
because we haven't foamed the walls.
We can't foam the walls because
the electrical is not done.
And that's kind of how SIPs work. We'd rather work right now on a instant life upgrade. Getting this complete will make our lives a little bit easier today. Siding, electrical, and foaming the walls is in the works. This is what we're tackling right now. When we laid out the electrical, these two outlets and that light, and we also positioned the plumbing for the washer and dryer, we had intentions of building kind of a kitchenette area here. We laid the plumbing out so that we could have a 30-inch base cabinet, about a 24-inch sink, and then a 18-inch base cabinet. That's gonna be pretty close to what we're actually going to build, except for there was something I didn't factor into my plan, and that's the ducting for the dryer. I can do a little bit better in making this more efficient in getting the dryer a little bit closer to that ducting, and that'll give us a little bit more space on this side. Some of you out there are thinking, do you want to get your dryer vent too close to that wall? This is going to seem nuts to you, and it seems a little bit nuts to me, but there is zero clearance required in the HVAC code for dryer venting. I know, right? It turns out that the fire danger is inside the ducting from lint catching fire. Although if you had a fire in your dryer vent, wouldn't you want clearance? We'll work through some of the subtle nuances to this project as we go through this video today, and I'm hoping we get all the way through the design. I've got a lot of little things that we'll have to share, so that's going to take up a little bit of this video. If you're not a planner, I challenge you to watch this video. You might find that this type of planning is kind of fun. It's almost as fun as building stuff, and it's definitely more fun than building stuff with no plan. So we're gonna have a set of upper cabinets here. We're gonna have a cabinet over the dryer, this stackable unit, and then we'll have our base cabinets. We're hoping to have a garbage over here, the sink with a below sink drawer, and then drawers on a base cabinet here with a single piece stainless steel top and sink in one. So Alyssa and I sat down and kind of discussed this project, things that we both felt like were important. And I used a software to kind of just throw a quick sketch together. This has been a really great resource for Alyssa and I because it helps us to visualize concepts instead of having to kind of abstract discuss them. For those who are wondering, this is Sketchup. It is a free software. There are pro versions that allow you to do more features, but you can use this software for free. Quick disclosure about software like this. It can draw everything from the space station to a jewelry box. Because of that, there's a learning curve. I think in this era of like plug and play, click and drag software, we're not used to having to learn a software. And this is not one that's going to make you look like a graphic designer. In fact, when I first started using the software, I was very frustrated, and at the end of the day, it was me, not the software. The more I spend time with it, the more confident I become with it, and the more I trust it. So taking the time to draw this out helped us to visualize the concept. But it's not really a buildable drawing. And what I'd like to do today is challenge myself to use the intricacies and the known limitations of this project and to draw something that's actually buildable from the drawings. A bit of a rewind, I recently built a man basket. If you haven't seen those videos, kind of an interesting series. It was a challenge for me because I'm not a metal worker. And I also challenged myself to spend some time with design software. Instead of doing what kind of I felt the urge to do, which was go out, start cutting, and figure it out, I decided to draw it out. And it took me 4.5 hours to use actual material thicknesses and things and draw this plan for this project. I wanted to test whether I could trust this software or not. So blindly, I created a cut list. And I went out and I cut it, and it all fit. And that told me that the time invested in drawing was well invested. There are a few things, though, that we need to talk about that kind of are constraints for a project like this. I'm definitely not going to be teaching you guys how to build cabinets in this video. It's not going to happen. I don't know what I'm doing. So kind of take all of this stuff with a grain of salt. So what I do know about cabinets is there's a few kind of constraining factors in designing these cabinets for this project, and most all cabinets. You kind of have to decide a couple of design elements, and then you have to kind of decide on your hardware. The basic design elements that are really important to decide on are to have a framed cabinet or a frameless cabinet. But in a nutshell, a framed cabinet has kind of a face frame on it, and it kind of looks more furniture-like. You're supposed to see the face frame. It's part of the design. And a frameless cabinet is really not part of the design. It's kind of meant to be hidden or not seen when all the doors and the drawers are closed. That's an important factor. Then you have to decide, how do you want the doors and the drawer fronts to interface with the cabinet? A lot of people choose to have the doors and the drawers kind of outside that face, so it's kind of like in a different plane compared to the face. If you will, this is the face, and the door or the drawer sits on top. Other people choose to have the door and the drawer in the same plane as the face. This is what's called an inset door or drawer. Once you kind of narrow down, do you want a face frame or no face frame? Do you want inset doors, or do you want some that are on the outside of the face frame? And from there, you can start to kind of design the box and what it all looks like. The reason you have to decide those elements first is they will determine the hardware options that you have, because then you need to do the research on the hardware. And the hardware will again create constraints for the project, limiting you on how that face frame or frameless cabinet can be built and how your drawers are built. Alyssa and I both like a framed cabinet, but we want it to be a petite frame. So that's kind of an important design factor. And then we also agree that we would like to have inset doors and drawers. So I've taken the time to study hardware, and I kind of narrowed it down to one company that I feel like has really done a great job creating a quality product and also has great detailed drawings, and I think is going to serve Alyssa and I really well. And that company is Bloom. This part of the process is going to seem tedious if you're a DIY person. Cabinet people already know their hardware options and they're aware of what's available and how it all works. But even something as simple as which hinge to select for your application could take you a little while. And the fact that the hinge and the clip are actually two separate pieces can be kind of confusing. So when it comes to hardware, plan on spending quite a bit of time really trying to understand how the geometry works and ultimately how that's going to affect the design of your cabinets. The same thing is true for the slides. There are certain geometries that are just important that you have to take into consideration in the design, or the slide will not function, or it won't function well. Bloom has a great product that includes things that we've come to kind of expect on cabinetry, which is soft close and also underside drawer slides. These slides are hidden from view, so you don't actually see them, and it makes for a more beautiful kind of presentation to the cabinet. They have a very simple locking feature that allows you to just remove the drawer if you either need to clean it or for some other reason maybe need to access the cabinet. They're a beautiful system that also offers a mechanical opener, and you'll kind of see later on where this will come into effect on some of the cabinets that we want to build. This allows you to do basically a hands-free opening on a cabinet, but it doesn't force you to give up the soft close option. The next really important question that you'll need to answer is materials. We started by looking for materials that are fairly easy to acquire. Of course, as many who have been following us know, we have a sawmill and we have access to a lot of raw materials. We do want to try to use some of those, but there's definitely a time and a place for a manufactured product. An example of that would be hardwood plywood or melamine. Melamine is pretty common on cabinets because it's super easy to clean. But from a construction and durability standpoint, I would question how easy it is to build with, because it's very fragile. If you bang on it or do anything like that, you're going to damage it, and it's just really frustrating. From a durability standpoint, if you can get it together and it doesn't fall apart, it's probably going to last you a really long time. But it is easy to chip and scratch, things like that. So I guess I'm not trying to pick on melamine. I'm just saying that there's drawbacks, even though it is easy to clean. We're going to probably go the direction of using a hardwood plywood. These plywoods are basically normal plywood, but the face veneer on them is nice. It's very presentable. And some of them you can even get a single-sided coating that is very cleanable. So you kind of get the benefits of the melamine without some of the drawbacks. So there's lots of things that have to be taken into account to create such a simple set of cabinets. Of course, anybody watching this probably already knows that. That's why you're watching it. We're going to try to take into consideration all those factors. The design factors that Alyssa and I really like, the materials that we either A, have available to us, or B, prefer to build with, and then the design limitations that the hardware we've chosen presents. So let's kind of dive in, and we'll start with kind of a fresh slate with SketchUp, and we'll start working through some of the kind of initial designs. So we're starting with a blank slate here, and we're going to draw out basically just the base dimensions of our cabinet here. These are the boxes that will end up creating the holes for, materials, and then also for the drawers and things like that. So I'm going to take a little bit of time and kind of work through this drawing and try to get the boxes and the face frames kind of drawn out so that we can understand how these will actually look in the end. All right, that took me quite a bit longer than I thought. I'm sure there's a lot of things that I'm not doing right with SketchUp, and I think that's kind of part of the lesson with this video, is that if you can figure out a way to make it work, don't worry so much about trying to be some sort of like software expert. I think this is kind of like, I hate to say it, during a planning video to say it's good enough. It's good enough. I think if we can get to the point where we can understand the components and we can visualize the project, I think we can call that a good day. So I spent some time really tidying up these drawings. Obviously, these are pretty clear what they are. We've got our 30-inch base cabinet on the left, a 26-inch sink base cabinet in the middle, and then a 16-inch on the right. On the bottom, something that we're going to do is we're not going to make these cabinets go all the way to the floor for a couple of reasons. One, we don't want them to be subject to water damage. First of all, they're going in a garage and the odds of water damage are very high. Number two, it's actually easier to build these boxes the way they're designed now. These small legs that you see, you can actually purchase, and they're called a cabinet leveler, not a leg. And they actually have a clip that the toe kick clips onto, and that way the toe kick is removable. You can clean underneath the cabinet and get all the debris and dust bunnies and stuff like that out of there. And then if for some reason there is water damage, the legs are plastic, and so you're not going to damage the cabinets. Simply replace the toe kick and you're back in business. I've made it so that we can see each individual cabinet, so we can look really closely at our 30-inch base. We can even zoom in to the point where we can understand this piece of lumber. And that way we can do accurate measurements. So we can run dimensions on this, and we don't have to think anymore. We can just pull measurements out to the side and we'll know exactly how big this cabinet is. Cut the board and we're done. It's definitely something that takes a lot of patience. I get that, and I can see why people don't like to go through this process, because it feels like you could have already built these cabinets by now. Am I right? But I think you can really start to understand how you can identify design flaws, as you go through this process on paper, and you're going to save a lot more plywood. And by the way, this plywood is not a cheap material. Something else that I did was I put each cabinet in its own layer, and that way we can kind of, as this thing gets more and more complicated, we're able to kind of start to slice and dice this drawing. It kind of allows us to focus. So we can get rid of, say, the sink base and the cabinet base, or the 16-inch, and we can work just on this guy. Of course, what we're looking at here is just the box. This is all that we're going to make out of plywood, and it's just a few sides and some supports going across. We've kind of just taken some rough numbers. They're not perfect. I guess there's a lot of standards and constraints, like we said earlier in the video, but then there's like lots of leeway. So we're going to build, we're looking at 6-inch drawers here on the top. And these will basically be utensil drawers and silverware type drawers. That might be a little bit deep. I'm not really sure. The nice thing about this software, though, is that I can make an adjustment. I could just grab this component and we can just move it up if we wanted to. So if we don't like the way that looks, we can grab it and we can just move it. And we can make quick changes to these drawings. So we've got kind of the rough skeleton or carcass of these cabinets drawn out. And then that kind of helps us to visualize the bases. Of course, these aren't the uppers. We don't have everything drawn here, but this is a great place to start. So now that we have kind of the general carcass, we need to focus on a couple of things. We need to build the face frames, since we're building framed cabinets. If you were building frameless cabinets, this would basically be the box, but you'd want to build it or trim it in some sort of finish material. Since we're going to be using plywood, the face frames are going to hide this. And of course, we need to build the drawers. So let's work on getting the face frames drawn out and getting the drawers drawn out, and this thing's really going to start to take shape. Well guys, as I'm working through building the drawer faces, kind of exactly the reason that we're doing this has surfaced. So I made a mistake drawing the boxes. I didn't account for the face frame depth. I had drawn the boxes as though they were frameless, so the box comes all the way to the front, and of course our doors are inset, so the frame and the door would be in the same plane, except we're doing a framed cabinet. Thankfully, in the software, it's tedious, totally get it, but it takes just a few minutes to kind of adjust those box depths and get those set back the way they should be. And now we can actually move forward with drawing the face frames and the boxes. Before we jump into drawing the boxes, this is kind of where the details of your hardware are going to really become important. The information that Bloom provides is actually really helpful in designing your boxes. I'm sure that once you kind of understand one company's hardware and kind of how they do things, it's probably really easy to whip together pretty much any cabinet. What do you want? Drawers and doors? No problem. But sitting and taking the time to read through the detail for these rails really is helpful in designing the boxes. It almost takes the thinking out of it a little bit because they start with your cabinet and then you reverse engineer that into the drawer size. So the information that they provide gives us restrictions. For example, they require you to have a 1/2 inch bottom recess. Well, there you go. You don't have to wonder how deep does the bottom of the drawer have to be from the sides. 1/2 inch, that's the answer. They don't tell you how thick that your bottom has to be, but they're telling you that the recess at the bottom has to be 1/2 inch. They're also telling you that you basically take the opening width, which is your face frame or the frameless opening, and you subtract from there to get the drawer size. And you use just deductive math to figure that out. Once you kind of have those things sorted out, the drawer sizes almost become kind of intuitive. So let's take some time. I'm going to use the notes that I have from Bloom and this design sheet, and we'll try to figure out if we can get the drawers drawn without making too many mistakes. What I think I might do is draw one drawer and then really look it over hard and make a decision if we've got it right, and then we'll make other drawers. So I can see that my drawer faces are actually wrong also because they don't account for a face frame. Why are you not making a freaking mark? Annoying. Why? Well, these drawers are taking a long time. It's definitely very intricate work. I can see that. I kind of already knew that. I've made probably at least a 6 mistakes so far in drawing these out because so much is referenced off of different things. If you pull your references from the wrong place, you get the wrong size drawer. Hopefully, I've got it all sorted out now, and I think one of the benefits to working with a software like this is that when you create a component, that component can then be modified to fit other areas. So I'm hoping that the 2 drawers that I have drawn right now, I can actually just mirror those into other locations and then just modify them to fit those openings. As long as we can get these drawers done, I think the fronts will actually be pretty simple to draw. I went ahead and deleted the fronts that I already had because I realized I had just done them all wrong. I should have drawn the face frames first, and quite frankly, build the drawers first. And then the fronts, they should be pretty quick, and they'll kind of validate whether you've got your drawers in the right position or not. So hopefully I can get this wrapped up here pretty soon. This is definitely more difficult to share with you guys than I originally thought. It's kind of an atypical video for us. There's not a lot of sawdust and I'm not very dirty, but I am enjoying this process. It definitely tests your patience. But so far, I'm glad that I'm finding the problems that I am in the software instead of cutting them up and finding out that I've got it all wrong and have to buy new material. So a lot of the time went into drawing the first drawer using those constraints that the hardware gave us. and then it's a matter of just dragging them around and making them fit the box. Thankfully, the manufacturer of these slides gives you a constraint that's really easy to work with. It's basically the opening. It's basically like this dimension here, which is the face frame, and then subtract 5/8 of an inch, and that should be the outside dimension of your drawers. Thankfully, when I copy and paste all these drawers all over the place, guess what? I can pull a measurement, compare the two, and make sure they're correct. And since the face frames are, consistent across the cabinetry, I can pull the measurement like from here on the edge of the drawer against the side of the cabinet. And that makes sure that these drawers are positioned correctly inside the cabinet. I'm really happy with how this turned out, although I do have some technical questions, like right in here where we kind of have this centerpiece in the face frame. That piece, what happens is the reveal that's behind it, if we could see like right back in here, we would see that the reveal is only about 1/4 of an inch. And that's because that piece is spanning a 3/4 inch piece of plywood. Whereas over here on the outside of the box, that reveal is going to be 1/2 an inch. And that 1/2 an inch is obviously split between two openings. I don't know if that's okay. I did look at the details for the drawers, and if you look really closely, there's a tiny little dimension that they show you. I can't remember where it's at here. They show you this dimension, and they don't really say it, but it's kind of an unspoken or deductive type measurement. Basically, when you take the opening dimension and you subtract 5/8 of an inch, that's the minimum amount that you have to have this drawer fit. So anything more than that, and you're good to go. Because of that, I think we're in good shape. So it looks like we're ready to start drawing the drawer fronts, and then we basically just need to put the top on and kind of hammer out roughly what a sink might look like. That's a whole different project. It should be fairly simple to kind of fly through here, and all we have to do is add these drawer faces. And this is kind of how you would actually build this cabinet also. The drawer faces are actually not part of the drawer. They would be added after the fact. So it makes sense that we would work really hard to make sure that the drawers are correct and that everything fits first, and then we can do the drawer fronts. Let me see if I can turn on a different view so you guys can kind of see a little bit different perspective here. So let's kind of pan around here and see if we've got the drawer in the right place or not. Looks like we don't. You can kind of see that the drawers are actually set back a little bit too far. So here's our face frame and here's our drawer. 5/8 of an inch it looks like. So we're off by 5/8 of an inch. I'm not really sure what's happening there, but that's why validating things in the software makes a lot of sense. If we turn the face frames off here, let's see what we see. So, okay, there's something fishy going on there, but we can deal with that in a minute. Let's get rid of that guy. So it does look like our drawer front here is actually where it should be, but the drawer is not. It's actually too far back. Because of the way the software works, that should be pretty easy to change. And we'll just move it forward in this plane. We can fix the plane, and we'll set it right to the edge of the drawer face there. And now if we zoom in and look, we'll see that we're right on that drawer face. So if that drawer is a little bit too far back, it makes me worried that one of two things is true. Either our drawer is not long enough, 1'9", what is that, 21 inches? That is correct. So we do have a little bit of extra space in the back of the cabinet. We've got about 3 inches of extra space. Anyway, that's a great catch there. It's kind of a different view, a 3D type view. Helps you to kind of picture the whole thing as one component. Not sure how that's going to work. I guess we'll figure that out another time. So the drawer fronts are all done, and like I said before, we need to move some of the drawers forward. I can do that later. Everything's looking really good. This set of cabinets is probably the most complicated piece of cabinetry I've ever drawn, and to this level of detail. I think if you look at the previous drawing that I had, this little guy, you know, it's gonna get the job done, but you're gonna have to kind of like infer a lot from this. There's a lot that's not taken into account. Although it is good for like just quickly hashing out ideas, I wouldn't want to try to build this. This is looking way more buildable. Everything is really driven down to the component. We can slice and dice however we want. We can turn these drawer faces off and we can look really closely at the drawers. No, these aren't maybe the final drawer dimensions. I haven't really settled on that yet, but you can kind of get where I'm coming from, that this stuff is getting super precise. So the only thing that I really want to leave you guys with, and I guess maybe I'd like to get a little bit done too this evening, is to get a top on here and kind of a dummy sink. Like I said, that's something we're gonna have to talk about later. That's kind of a whole different design component. But hopefully you guys are enjoying this. This has come a long ways. So what we're thinking about doing is a single piece stainless steel top. That's probably gonna be 16 gauge steel. So let's make this top 1 7/16 thick. And that'll be a good backer for the sink that we're gonna put on here. And then what we can do is add a backsplash. What we're wanting to do is a single piece sink and backsplash all in one. All right, great. Now we've got our backsplash kind of in there. And I think we can talk more about that later, but we've got some ideas on how to continue that backsplash up the wall. And I think it'll turn out super good. Let's put a sink in here that's 20 inches. So let's go 2 inches. Yeah, that works. Let's punch that. Oops, let's punch that all the way through. Perfect. There we go. Now we can actually put a sink in there. So let's turn the countertop back on. So let's measure that real quick. So this total distance is 1 feet 11 and a half, 1 feet 5 1/4. Let's draw this back. And let's see, what did we do? We went 2 inches, I think. Let's go down 12 inches. There we go. That's looking more like a sink. Let's go with a 1 inch hole. And we finally have a faucet. So it's not beautiful. There's no handle to turn it on, so don't bother trying. But overall, that's looking much better. I think having these cabinets drawn out will help us to kind of finalize the countertop design and also work through the sink design. There's a couple features that we're hoping to have on the sink. Here to the right, we'd actually like to have a kind of a drainer tray that's all part of the top that will go into the sink. That way we don't have to take up all this valuable counter space with dishes, although it's probably still gonna happen anyway, because if you know anything about canning, you know there's a ridiculous amount of dishes that go with it. But I think that'll help make just life a little bit easier and save counter space. What do you think, guys? I mean, this video was actually pretty hard for me to shoot. It's kind of a new style or a different style than we're used to. And I feel like this type of work takes just a lot of thinking. It's one thing to do a tutorial on how to build a box or something like that, but to really actually think through a project and manifest it and work through the nitty-gritty details takes a lot of time. I think the total amount of time, if I sat down and drew just this set of lower cabinets, which by the way, if you look over here, this is about half of the cabinets that we need for this laundry area. It probably took me between 3 and 4 hours. I had some mistakes. I hit close a couple times on accident, stuff like that. But I would say that that time invested has already uncovered some difficulties or challenges in the design. And I feel like with a little bit more time, I could just pull measurements off here, grab a cut sheet, I could hand it to anybody. And I feel like these cabinets would come back to me the way I wanted them. Well, that's it for this one, guys. The cabinets aren't perfect. Obviously, I need to spend a lot more time planning, but hopefully you got a good idea kind of how we go through this thought process, kind of how we look at something. Obviously, we're kind of not sharing the forethought that went into the floor plan right here. We're kind of already jumping ahead to cabinetry, but hopefully enjoyed watching work in SketchUp and kind of watch this set of cabinets come to life. I've got a lot of work left to do on the uppers and above the washer and dryer and all that stuff. Keep working on it. I think we'll get there, and I feel like when it comes time to start cutting and making this thing, I think we're gonna have a lot more fun. Thanks for joining us. We'll see whatever we're working on next time. I thought it'd be fun just kind of at the end of this video to kind of take this thing, blow it apart, and just look at it piece by piece. So we've got the back of the cabinet here, and I think that's just 1/4 inch material, might be 1/2 inch, I can't remember. We can measure that. So we built a countertop, and that obviously just is kind of like taking up space, but gives you some idea kind of how the whole thing's gonna come together with a piece of stainless steel on there. So let's turn that off. And we put an end wall in there. I just did that for kind of looks. So obviously the washer and dryer is gonna go on the right-hand side here, and then there's actually gonna be room for an upper cabinet on the right. And then we've got a set of uppers above each one of these that'll basically mimic those, except for the sink. There's gonna be a fairly small upper there. This is kind of a rough idea what we're thinking, but we'll have to just see even if those dimensions will work. So we'll take the end wall out, and that leaves us basically with the base cabinets. And we can take these components away one at a time. We've got the drawer faces, so let's maybe take the drawer faces away. And now we're looking at just the face frames, the drawers, the cabinet boxes. And let's take the drawer faces away. That'll be kind of interesting. So now we're just looking at the boxes. And I don't think we ever added the drawers to any kind of a layer. Let me do that real quick. We'll just add those to a layer. And that way we can turn those off too and look at that. Cool. So now we can turn the drawers off. And now again, we're just looking at the cabinet bases. So that's kind of an idea roughly what it takes to put these all together. And then of course we just have the cabinet levelers here on the bottom. We did not draw in the toe kicks. We can do that. So here's each base cabinet. We'll build these one at a time. There's our 30-inch base cabinet. Then we'll build the sink base, and those will get attached to the sides. And then the 16. And this is gonna be a garbage recycle. We've talked about doing a pull-out cutting board here. I'm not sure if that's gonna happen or not. Obviously this will be taken up by the sink, and this will actually have to be removed too because of all the plumbing. And we have a really shallow drawer here. I think this drawer is actually gonna be too deep as it is, because the P-trap coming down here from the sink will actually protrude quite a bit into this drawer space. But the thinking is with the drawer, we could actually pull it out and get the full use of that space. So that's kind of cool to look at. And then these deep drawers, we're hoping to be able to put like pots, pans, blenders, espresso machine, all that stuff, and kind of hide that now. In the future, we'll use it for pots and pans and grinders and things like that. So let's go ahead and turn these cabinets off, and let's just look at the drawers and the drawer faces. This kind of gives you an idea how the drawers get built. So the drawers are very much independent of the faces. We'll build each one of these one at a time, and I don't have the drawings for the slides, but the slides actually go underneath the drawer, and they're a concealed slide. And so that's one of the reasons that the drawer back doesn't come all the way down to the bottom of the drawer. It's one of those constraints, design constraints that we mentioned earlier. So in theory, if we do it right, that's about what all the drawers will look like. Obviously, I haven't really finalized the depth of these two drawers. This one I think is going to be more shallow because of the sink plumbing. These might be just a little bit deeper, maybe. I'm not sure how deep they really need to be. But giving adequate kind of head space in there will make sure that these are super usable. And then of course we need room for a couple of garbage cans in here. We'll actually redesign this to hold a couple of garbage cans. And of course that leaves a little bit of room up here for a silverware drawer or something. We're thinking that here on the sink front, we'll probably do a tip out, and it'll be a place for us to keep sponges and scrubbies and stuff like that, and keep those off the countertop as well. So that's it. We put it all back together. We end up with a basic kitchen set.